Stepmom always hated my dog, so I put a present in her bed. Have you ever felt like an unwelcome guest in your own home? Like no matter what you do, someone is always looking for a reason to make your life miserable? That's exactly how I felt when my dad remarried 3 years after my mom passed away. I was just 14 then, still grieving, still trying to figure out how to exist in a world without my mother's warm smile greeting me every morning. Max was my anchor during those dark days. A golden retriever puppy my mom had given me for my 12th birthday, just a year before her diagnosis. In many ways, Max was the last living connection I had to her, the last gift she ever gave me. When he would nuzzle against my tear-stained cheeks at night, it almost felt like Mom was still there, telling me everything would be okay. Dad met Christine at a work conference. She was pretty, successful, and made him laugh again, something I hadn't seen since Mom died. I wanted to be happy for him. I really did. But from the moment Christine stepped into our house for the first time, her eyes locked onto Max with unmistakable disdain. "I didn't realize you had a dog," she said, her voice dripping with barely concealed disgust as she pulled her designer pants away from Max's friendly sniffing. Dad laughed it off. "Max is practically family. He's been Emma's shadow since she got him." Christine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, I'm sure we can work something out." I should have recognized that calculating look, should have seen the warning signs. But Dad was happy for the first time in years, and I wanted so desperately to make things work. The wedding was small, just close family and friends. Dad asked if I was okay with it all happening so fast, and I lied, saying I was fine. What else could I do? Max wasn't invited to the ceremony. Christine had claimed she was allergic, though I'd never once seen her sneeze around him. Things changed almost immediately after they returned from their honeymoon. The first battle came when Christine suggested Max should sleep in the garage instead of in my room. "It's not sanitary having an animal on your bed," she insisted over dinner, cutting her chicken into perfect little squares. "Plus, his hair gets everywhere. I found some on the living room couch this morning." Dad glanced at me apologetically. "Maybe she has a point, Emma. Just for nighttime?" "Max has slept with me every night since Mom died," I said quietly, fighting back tears. "He helps with my nightmares." Christine sighed dramatically. "You're 15 now, Emma. Don't you think it's time to grow up a little? Your father and I are concerned about your dependency." My father and I. How quickly I had become the outsider. That night, Dad helped me set up a bed for Max in the garage. I smuggled him back into my room after everyone went to sleep, but Max's confused whimpering when I first left him there broke something inside me. It was the first skirmish in what would become a long, exhausting war. Over the next few months, Christine's campaign against Max grew more strategic. She'd leave her expensive shoes where he could reach them, then explode with rage when he inevitably chewed on them. She'd accidentally leave the back gate open, leading to frantic neighborhood searches and Dad's increasing frustration. "I don't understand why you can't be more careful," she'd say with practiced innocence after I'd spend hours searching, tears streaming down my face, terrified I'd lost my last connection to Mom. Dad tried to mediate at first. "Christine, you know how much Max means to Emma." But as time went on, his defenses grew weaker, more perfunctory. "Emma, you need to be more responsible with Max," he started saying. "Christine works hard to keep this house clean." It was as if he couldn't see what was happening, how she'd smile when he wasn't looking, how she'd whisper disgusting mutt under her breath when Max approached her, how deliberately she was trying to drive a wedge between me and the only two beings I loved that remained in my life. The worst part was watching Dad slowly transforming, adopting Christine's views as his own. The man who had once sprawled on the floor playing with Max now frowned at dog hair on his pants. The father who had helped me train him now snapped irritably when Max barked at the mailman. "Maybe your mom spoiled you too much with this dog thing," he said one day, and the casual cruelty of invoking my dead mother to criticize me left me speechless. My grades started slipping. My friends stopped inviting me over because I always declined, afraid to leave Max alone with Christine. I overheard her one night, sitting on the patio with a glass of wine, talking to her sister on the phone. "The dog has to go," she said, unaware I was just inside the door. "I've tried everything. It's the only way she'll finally let go of her mother and accept me." That night, I cried silently into Max's fur, his loyal eyes watching me with concern. He was only 3 years old. The thought of giving him up was unbearable, but the thought of what Christine might do to him when I wasn't around terrified me even more. "She doesn't understand, Max," I whispered. "Mom gave you to me because she knew I'd need you. She knew I'd need someone to love me unconditionally when she was gone. Something had to give. Something had to change. I just didn't know what, until the following weekend, when Christine's parents came to visit, and she decided to take her performance to a whole new level. Christine's parents were exactly what you'd expect: polished, judgmental, and immediately disapproving of Max. Her mother wrinkled her nose when he approached for a sniff, while her father made a show of brushing invisible dog hair from his pants every few minutes. "I didn't realize you still had the dog," Christine's mother remarked during dinner, emphasizing dog like it was a dirty word. Christine sighed dramatically. "We're working on that situation, Mother." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Working on that situation? I glanced at Dad, expecting him to say something, to defend Max, to defend me. Instead, he stared at his plate, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. "Emma is very attached," he finally mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Christine's father cleared his throat. "Well, sometimes difficult decisions have to be made when blending families. Compromises." I felt sick. This wasn't a discussion about household chores or bedroom decorations. This was about my dog, my companion, my lifeline. And they were talking about him like he was a piece of furniture that didn't match the new decor. Later that night, I overheard Christine and my dad arguing in their bedroom. I shouldn't have eavesdropped, but when I heard Max's name, I couldn't help myself. "It's been almost a year, Robert. I've tried to be patient, but that animal is driving me crazy. The hair, the smell, the way he follows her everywhere. It's not normal." "He's important to her, Christine. After losing her mom?" "That's exactly the problem. She's using that dog as a substitute for her mother. It's unhealthy. Dr. Pearson said..." "You talked to a therapist about this?" "Without me?" There was a pause. "I'm concerned, Robert. She barely has friends over. She spends all her time with that dog. It's not right." I didn't wait to hear my father's response. I ran back to my room, closed the door, and slid down against it, struggling to breathe. Max immediately came to my side, nuzzling my hand, sensing my distress. I hugged him tightly, inhaling his familiar scent. "They're not taking you away," I whispered fiercely. "I won't let them." The next morning was Sunday. Christine's parents were staying until Monday, and the tension in the house was suffocating. I took Max for an extra long walk, partly to escape the toxic atmosphere, and partly because I was terrified it might be one of our last walks together. When we returned, Christine was in the kitchen with her mother, preparing lunch. They both gave me identical looks of disapproval as Max's paws clicked across the tile floor. "Emma, could you please keep him outside until after lunch? My mother and I just cleaned in here," Christine said, her voice sugar-sweet, but her eyes cold. It was 90 degrees outside. "He'll overheat," I protested. "Just for an hour," she insisted. "You can give him water." "Let the dog out, Emma," her mother chimed in. "A little heat won't kill him." Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the casual cruelty. Maybe it was the realization that in this new family configuration, Max and I were both unwanted intruders. Whatever it was, in that moment, I hated them both with an intensity that frightened me. I took Max to my room instead, locking the door behind us. 10 minutes later, my father was knocking, his voice tight with anger. "Emma, open this door! Christine asked you to put Max outside." "It's too hot, Dad. He could get heat stroke." "Don't be dramatic. Open the door." When I reluctantly did, he wouldn't look at Max, who was wagging his tail hopefully at the sight of him. "This behavior stops now," Dad said. "You will respect Christine in this house." "What about respecting me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What about respecting Mom's memory?" His face hardened. "Don't you dare use your mother like that. She would want us to move forward, to be a family." "Not like this," I whispered. "She would never treat Max this way." Dad took Max's collar and led him outside, ignoring my tears. Max looked back at me, confused and hurt, as the door closed between us. I watched from the window as my beautiful dog settled into what little shade he could find, panting in the heat. That night, Christine announced she'd made a special dinner, a roast with her secret family recipe. Everyone praised her cooking skills while I pushed food around my plate, sick with worry about Max, who had been relegated to the garage for the evening. "Emma, eat your dinner," Dad scolded. Christine worked hard on this. I took a reluctant bite. It was actually delicious, which somehow made me even angrier. "So, Emma," Christine's father said, clearly attempting some awkward family bonding, "your father tells us you're interested in photography." Before I could answer, there was a crash from the garage, followed by frantic barking. Christine's mother jumped. "What on earth?" "It's just the dog," Christine said dismissively. "He probably knocked something over." The barking continued, growing more urgent. I stood up. "Sit down and finish your dinner," Dad said firmly. "Something's wrong with Max," I insisted. "He's fine," Christine snapped. "He's just trying to get attention." I ignored them both and ran to the garage. When I opened the door, I found Max distressed, circling frantically. He'd knocked over a container of antifreeze that Christine had accidentally left open on a low shelf. There was a small puddle on the floor, and to my horror, it looked like some had been licked up. Everyone knows antifreeze is lethal to dogs. Everyone. My scream brought the whole family running. What followed was a chaotic rush to the emergency vet, with Christine protesting her innocence the entire way. "It was an accident! How was I supposed to know dogs like the taste of antifreeze?" But I'd seen the satisfied glint in her eyes when the vet mentioned how lucky we were to have caught it so quickly. I knew the truth, even if my father refused to see it. This wasn't an accident. This was war. And if Christine wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. The night at the emergency vet was the longest of my life. Dad and I sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs while Christine and her parents went back home, claiming they needed rest. The vet had induced vomiting and started Max on a treatment to prevent kidney failure, but warned us the next 24 to 48 hours would be critical. Dad looked exhausted, the harsh fluorescent lights highlighting every line on his face. For the first time in months, he reached out and took my hand. "He's going to be okay," he said softly. "Max is strong." I wanted to believe him. I wanted even more to ask how he could possibly still defend Christine after what happened, but I bit my tongue. This fragile moment of connection felt too precious to shatter with accusations. "Mom would be so upset," I whispered instead. "She loved him too." Dad's eyes grew distant. "She did." He squeezed my hand. "Emma, I know things have been difficult with Christine." "She left that antifreeze out on purpose," I said, unable to hold back any longer. "She wants Max gone." Dad sighed heavily. "That's a serious accusation. Christine wouldn't do something like that." You don't see how she is when you're not around. The things she says, the way she treats him. She hates Max because he reminds me of Mom. Emma. No, Dad. You've chosen not to see it because it's easier. Because you want your new life to work so badly that you're willing to erase parts of our old one. The hurt in his eyes made me regret my words immediately, but I couldn't take them back. Before he could respond, the vet called us in to see Max. He was hooked up to an IV, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. His tail thumped weakly against the examination table when he saw us. The vet explained that Max had ingested only a small amount of antifreeze, thankfully not enough to cause permanent damage. We could take him home the next day, but he would need close monitoring. Keep all chemicals locked away, the vet advised seriously. Dogs are curious, and antifreeze has a sweet taste they're attracted to. Dad nodded, avoiding my gaze. I knew he was thinking about what I'd said. When we returned home the next day with Max, Christine met us at the door with what appeared to be genuine concern. She'd cleaned the garage, disposed of the antifreeze, and even bought a new dog bed that she placed in the living room. A peace offering, or perhaps just a performance for my father's benefit. I feel just terrible, she said, reaching to pet Max, who shrank away from her touch. I should have been more careful. For the next week, Christine was the picture of contrition. She suggested Max sleep in my room again while he recovers. She asked about his medication schedule. She even offered to take him for short walks, which I firmly declined. Dad seemed relieved by this apparent truce, but I knew better. I'd seen the mask slip too many times to believe it now. My suspicions were confirmed when Christine's parents left and she cornered me in the kitchen one morning while Dad was at work. I hope we can put this unfortunate incident behind us, she said, sipping her coffee. You mean you hoping Max would drink antifreeze? Yeah. Really unfortunate. Her eyes narrowed. Accidents happen, Emma. Your father and I are willing to move past this if you are. Does Dad know you talked to a therapist about getting rid of Max? Christine set her mug down carefully. I spoke to a professional about healthy family dynamics. Your attachment to that dog is concerning. His name is Max. The point is, she continued as if I hadn't spoken, your father agrees that your behavior has become problematic. The way you accused me, the disrespect you've shown. I heard you on the phone with your sister, I cut in. You said Max has to go, so I'll let go of Mom and accept you. Christine's perfectly composed face faltered for just a second. You shouldn't eavesdrop, Emma. It's childish. You're never going to replace my mom, I said, my voice trembling with anger. And you're never going to get rid of Max. Something ugly flashed across her face. We'll see about that. That night, I heard Christine and Dad arguing again. Their voices were hushed, but intense. I've tried everything, Robert. I've been patient. I've been understanding. But that dog makes me uncomfortable in my own home. It's her dog, Christine. After everything with the antifreeze, that was an accident. How many times do I have to say it? I know. But she's been through so much, losing her mother, adjusting to us. And I'm trying to help her move forward. That dog is keeping her stuck in the past. Dr. Pearson says, I'm not interested in what your therapist friend says about my daughter. I pulled my pillow over my head, not wanting to hear more. Max curled closer against me, his steady heartbeat a comfort in the darkness. The next morning, I found a brochure for a boarding kennel on the kitchen counter. My hands shook as I flipped through glossy images of chain-link runs and concrete floors. There was a note in Christine's handwriting. Something to consider while we're in Aspen next month. Dad and Christine had planned a ski trip for their anniversary, and I was supposed to stay with my grandparents. But seeing this brochure made it clear. Christine was planning to use the trip as an opportunity to get rid of Max permanently. I called my grandparents that afternoon from school. Would it be okay if I brought Max when I stay with you next month? Of course, sweetheart, Grandma said. You know we love that dog. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. When I got home, Christine was waiting, that brochure in her hand. I spoke with the kennel today, she said with a smile that chilled me. They have an opening for the dates we need. Your father thinks it's for the best. I already arranged for Max to stay with Grandma and Grandpa, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Christine's smile didn't waver. That won't be necessary. This is already settled. As she turned to leave, I knew I had to do something. This was no longer about winning an argument or defending my territory. This was about protecting Max from someone who was determined to take him away from me. That night, a plan began to form. Christine had declared war the moment she left that antifreeze out. Now it was my turn to fight back. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, Christine announced she was hosting her book club at our house that weekend. This was a big deal to her. A chance to show off our home to her perfectly polished friends, most of whom had never visited before. I need everyone's cooperation, she declared at dinner. The house needs to be spotless. And Emma, Max will need to stay in the garage during the meeting. Dad glanced at me, clearly expecting an argument, but I just nodded. Sure, Christine. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise before she could control her expression. Well, good. I appreciate that. Dad looked relieved, reaching over to squeeze my shoulder. I felt a twinge of guilt for what I was planning, but then I remembered the antifreeze, the boarding kennel brochure, the countless small cruelties. My resolve hardened. The next day after school, I took Max for a long walk in the park. It was there, watching him chase squirrels with boundless joy, that I finalized my plan. I needed something that would send a clear message without actually harming anyone. Something that would make Christine understand that Max and I were a package deal, mess and all. And really, what better message than the very thing she complained about most? I collected Max's poop in a bag as usual, but this time, I didn't throw it away. Instead, I double-bagged it and carefully placed it in my backpack. My heart raced as I walked home, feeling like I was carrying a ticking bomb. Saturday morning, Christine was in full hostess mode. She'd been cleaning since dawn, arranging fresh flowers, setting out fancy cheese platters, and fluffing the decorative pillows on the couch approximately 50 times. Emma, could you please vacuum the living room one more time? She called up to me. And then take Max to the garage. My friends will be here at noon. No problem, I replied, the picture of cooperation. I even helped clean the guest bathroom without being asked, earning a suspicious look from my father. You're in a good mood, he remarked as we crossed paths in the hallway. I shrugged. Just trying to be helpful. At 11:30, I dutifully led Max to the garage, making sure he had fresh water and his favorite toys. I gave him an extra long hug, whispering, "Just a few hours, buddy. It'll be worth it." Christine's book club arrived precisely at noon. 6 women with identical highlighted hair and designer handbags, all exclaiming over Christine's charming home and excellent taste. I stayed in my room, listening to their animated discussion about some bestseller none of them had actually finished reading. Around 1:30, Christine called up to me. "Emma, could you please bring out the raspberry tarts from the refrigerator?" This was it. My moment. "Coming," I called back sweetly. I retrieved the tarts as requested, serving them with a smile that made Christine beam with approval in front of her friends. As they gushed over the pastries, I excused myself, saying I had homework to finish. But instead of returning to my room, I crept into Christine and Dad's bedroom, the bag of dog poop clutched in my sweaty hand. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. I hesitated for just a moment before slipping into their private bathroom. Christine's side of the bed was immaculate, decorative pillows arranged just so, her silk pajamas folded neatly on her nightstand, a lavender sachet placed under her pillow. I carefully pulled back her Egyptian cotton sheets and placed my present right in the center of her side of the bed, making sure it was squarely in the middle where she couldn't miss it. Then I gently replaced the sheets, my hands shaking with adrenaline. I slipped back to my room undetected, collapsing on my bed with equal parts terror and exhilaration. What had I just done? The reality of my actions hit me all at once. This wasn't some harmless prank. This was deliberately destructive. But then I remembered Max's distress after drinking the antifreeze, and my resolve returned. Christine had escalated this war. I was just fighting back with the weapons I had. The book club meeting wrapped up around 3 o'clock. I heard the chorus of goodbyes, Christine's practiced laugh, the front door opening and closing multiple times. Then silence, followed by the sound of cleaning up, dishes being loaded into the dishwasher, furniture being returned to its proper place. I released Max from the garage, trying to act normal as we settled in the living room. Dad came home from his golf game around 5 o'clock, praising Christine for how well the book club had gone. They decided to order pizza for dinner, too tired to cook. The evening passed uneventfully, the calm before the storm. As bedtime approached, my anxiety skyrocketed. Christine usually went to bed around 10:30, reading for about half an hour before turning out the light. Each minute that passed felt like an eternity. At 10:25, Christine yawned dramatically. "I think I'll turn in. Today was exhausting." "I'll be up in a bit," Dad replied, engrossed in a basketball game on TV. I pretended to be absorbed in my phone, but every nerve in my body was on high alert. Christine headed upstairs. I counted her steps, imagining her routine. Washing her face, applying her expensive night cream, flossing meticulously. Then finally, the moment of truth. I heard the bathroom door open, footsteps approaching the bed, the soft rustle of sheets being pulled back. The scream that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard, primal, horrified, rage-filled. It echoed through the house like a banshee wail. Dad jumped up from the couch, nearly knocking over the coffee table. "Christine?" He raced upstairs, Max barking excitedly at the commotion. I followed slowly, my heart in my throat. When I reached their bedroom doorway, the scene was exactly as I'd imagined. Christine standing beside the bed in her silk pajamas, pointing a trembling finger at the brown mess now exposed on her pristine sheets. Dad staring in confusion, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "The dog!" Christine shrieked when she saw me. "Your dog did this!" I arranged my face into what I hoped was a convincing look of shock. "What? But Max was in the garage all afternoon." "Then how did this get here?" she screamed, her perfectly composed mask completely shattered. Dad looked from the bed to me, to Max, who was peering curiously from behind my legs. I don't understand," he stammered. "How could he have—" "He didn't!" Christine was practically hyperventilating now. "She did this. She put it there." All eyes turned to me. The moment of truth had arrived, and suddenly I wasn't sure I was ready for the consequences of what I'd done. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I fully understood what I was doing when I placed that dog poop in Christine's bed. Was I just a hurt teenager lashing out? Or was I fighting for something more important? The line between righteous defiance and petty revenge is thinner than most people realize, especially when you're 16 and feeling cornered. "Emma?" Dad's voice cut through my thoughts, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Did you do this?" Christine was practically vibrating with rage. "Of course she did. She's been sabotaging our relationship from day one. This is sick, Robert. Sick." I could have denied it. Could have manufactured some elaborate explanation. blamed it on Christine's own carelessness somehow. But standing there, seeing the mask finally ripped completely off her face, I decided the truth was my best weapon. "Yes," I said simply. "I did it." Dad's face fell. "Emma, why would you do something like this?" Before I could answer, Christine exploded. "Because she's disturbed. I've been telling you for months. First the accusations about the antifreeze. Now this disgusting, disgusting act. She needs professional help, Robert." "I did it because she's been trying to get rid of Max since the day she moved in," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Because she left that antifreeze out on purpose. Because she made arrangements to put him in a kennel while we visit Grandma and Grandpa." "That's ridiculous," Christine sputtered. "Robert, you can't possibly believe—" "I heard you on the phone with your sister," I continued, looking directly at my father. "She said Max has to go, so I'll finally let go of Mom and accept her. I heard her talking to you about that therapist who thinks my attachment to Max is unhealthy." Dad's eyes moved between us, uncertainty written across his face. "She's lying," Christine said, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Actually, I'm not—" Christine's face drained of color as I held up the screen, showing a recording app. I hadn't actually recorded anything. I wasn't that strategic in my planning, but she didn't know that. "You recorded me? In my own home?" Christine's voice rose to a dangerous pitch. "I needed evidence," I said. No one was believing me. Dad stepped forward, his hand extended. "Emma, let me hear it." My bluff was about to be called. I clutched the phone tighter, mind racing. "I'll play it for you, but not while she's here." "This is absurd," Christine snapped. "Robert, are you actually entertaining this? Your daughter put dog feces in our bed. This is beyond unacceptable." Dad rubbed his temples, looking suddenly older. "Christine, could you give us a moment? Please?" "I will not be sent out of my own bedroom like a child. That bed needs to be stripped, the sheets need to be burned, and she needs consequences." "Christine," Dad said, his voice firmer now. "Please." Something in his tone must have reached her because she stomped into their bathroom, slamming the door behind her. Dad sank onto the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding the soiled area. "Emma, this isn't like you." "This isn't like you either, Dad," I said quietly. "The way you've been since she moved in. It's like you forgot about me and Mom entirely. That's not fair, isn't it? You let her exile Max to the garage. You let her talk about my unhealthy attachment to the dog Mom gave me before she died. You were going to let her send him to a kennel instead of bringing him to Grandma's." "I didn't know about the kennel," Dad admitted, looking genuinely surprised. "We discussed options, but nothing was decided." I pulled the brochure from my back pocket and handed it to him. "She already called them, already made the reservation." Dad stared at the brochure, something shifting in his expression. "Why didn't you just talk to me about this?" "I tried. So many times. But you always take her side. It's like you're so afraid of being alone again that you can't see what she's really like." The bathroom door flew open. Christine had apparently been listening to every word. "Oh, that's rich coming from you. You've been hostile from day one. Nothing I do is ever good enough. I've tried to be a mother to you." "I already had a mother." The words burst out of me with unexpected force. "I don't need another one. I just needed my dad to still be my dad." The room fell silent. Dad looked stricken, his eyes filling with tears. Max whined softly, sensing the tension, and pressed himself against my legs. "I think," Dad said finally, his voice strained, "we all need some time to cool down and think about things." Christine made a sound of disbelief. Think about things. Your daughter put dog excrement in our marital bed, Robert. What is there to think about? Dad stood up slowly. Emma, go to your room. Take Max with you. We'll discuss this in the morning. Robert. In the morning, Christine. There was a finality in his voice I hadn't heard in years. The voice of my father before grief had hollowed him out, before he'd become so desperate for a second chance at happiness that he'd sacrificed pieces of our past to get it. That night, I barely slept. Max curled protectively around me as I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd just made everything worse. Around dawn, I heard quiet voices downstairs, then the sound of the front door closing, a car starting. When I ventured downstairs at breakfast time, Dad was sitting alone at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up when he saw me, his expression unreadable. Christine's gone to stay with her sister for a few days, he said simply. We need to talk. The conversation that followed was the most honest one we'd had since Mom died. Dad admitted he'd been so focused on moving forward that he'd failed to see how much pain I was still carrying. I confessed that while I wanted him to be happy, I was terrified of losing the last parent I had. And Max? I asked cautiously. Dad sighed. Max stays. He's family. I didn't ask if Christine would be coming back. Somehow I already knew the answer. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Sometimes a present in a bed is really a wake-up call disguised as dog poop. 2 months later, Dad and I moved to a smaller house closer to my grandparents. Max enjoys the bigger yard, and Dad is slowly finding his way back to the person he used to be. We talk about Mom more often now, remembering her without that shadow of pain that used to cross his face. Christine sent divorce papers without ever returning to the house. Sometimes I feel guilty about my role in ending their marriage. But then I remember that relationships built on ultimatums and manipulation rarely survive anyway. I just accelerated the inevitable. You know, looking back at everything that happened with Christine, I learned something important. Sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand when someone tries to take away something you love. Was putting dog poop in her bed the most mature response? Probably not. But when you're backed into a corner and no one is listening, sometimes you have to make a statement they can't ignore. The most valuable thing I gained wasn't just keeping Max. It was getting my dad back. Sometimes the people we love get lost trying to build a new life, and they need a wake-up call to remember what matters. Max wasn't just a dog. He was my connection to my mom, my best friend during the hardest time of my life. Some people will never understand that kind of bond, and that's okay. They don't have to understand it to respect it. If you've ever had to fight for someone you love, human or furry friend, drop your story in the comments below. Have you ever had to do something extreme to make your point? Was it worth it? Let me know. Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this story, and subscribe for more real-life drama every day. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. What should I share next time? Let me know in the comments. And remember, sometimes you have to make a mess to clean up a bigger one. See you in the next video.